Hi guys. So welcome, and it's nice to see you, and at the same time I wish it were under different circumstances that we were meeting. But this is where we are. So I wanted to do a little introduction here and also to tell you more in depth about my story with having chronic fatigue syndrome so many years ago that allows me to be so well equipped to deal with what so many of you and we are dealing with now. So, before I start, I just wanted to let you know that the other videos that are going to be within this YouTube playlist and channel are, well, within this playlist specifically, are going to be very helpful for you. I would really recommend starting out with the breathing and with the body scan and emotion scan videos. Those are two things that you can do most of the time, even when you feel really horrible. Now, to be honest, I didn't do them for probably the first 2 or 3 days that I was in the super sick portion of COVID, but I did get myself to do them once I got to about the third day. And I did actually do the body scan and emotion one, my own variation of it. But those are the two things that are going to really help you cope with all of this, and that are going to help you get back into your body, which is really what your body needs. Right? So we'll be going over that at some point too. There are a lot of mindset things that you're going to have to shift that I suggest that you shift, right? So for me, because of my past experience, going through the uncertainty of how long the symptoms are going to last and having some of these fallbacks, relapses, whatever you want to call them, right, is not nearly as difficult as it was, so many years ago when I had chronic fatigue syndrome, because I'm more comfortable with living with this uncertainty now. And those are the things that I'm going to be teaching you here on the YouTube channel. I'm also offering a 5-day COVID recovery plan. It's COVID and wellness, and that's another really cool thing about what you are experiencing right now, and that's that you're going to be learning tools that you can use in your everyday life once you are fully recovered, once you are fully well, that are going to help you just in your everyday life. These are things that I, for the most part, do in my everyday life. And even for those of you who aren't ill with COVID, most of these are applicable to you as well. There are a couple that aren't quite, but we'll go through those. And there was something else I was going to say, but I can't remember. So yeah, so my experience of this has not been that bad. That's what I was going to say. I did have about 3 days of completely flipping out when I could feel that kind of the second round of COVID coming on, where I was bedbound again for 3 or 4 days, I can't even remember, and when I realized that I was still experiencing symptoms even before that. So, but what I did was exactly what I'm going to teach you to do. And so by the end of that third day, because my fear was, oh my God, I'm going to be going into this 8 years of this kind of feeling again. And I just flipped out. I was crying, I was all this stuff, but I was also, like I said, doing the things that I'm going to teach you to do, watching myself, so being the observer. So if you meditate at all, then you're probably familiar with that idea of being the observer. And then at the same time allowing myself to really feel the feelings, not to wallow in them, but to feel them. But for sure what I was feeling was, I'm a victim, this isn't fair, how can this be happening again? Just feeling really sorry for myself and super sad and cut off and rejected even, and all these different things. And it was just all stuff that was coming up from my past experience. And then when I did get to the other side of that, even though I was still having fairly significant symptoms, I was still bedbound for most of the time, but I just wasn't worried. That's the best way I know how to describe it. So, my experience, when I was in my 20s, I was working on a film set in Charleston, on a big, Hollywood film, because I was pursuing my acting career at that point. And the plan was to move out to LA, and I'd gotten some fantastic auditions and done really well with those, and was getting to know people in LA and in Charleston at the time. And I got sick right before I was supposed to start working on that film. And I was working on the crew. I wasn't acting on that particular one. But yeah, I got sick for, I don't know, it was like 3 or 4 days, and I can't even remember if I had fever or what. It felt like a cold or a flu or something. But I didn't even go to the doctor or anything. And then I actually I went to that first day to meet everybody and stuff like that. I think I went to a couple of days. This has been a long time ago, you guys. So I went, I think, for a couple of days, and then I started to feel really, really bad again. And we were filming on the beach in the summer in Charleston, South Carolina, which means it's hot and it's humid. And so when I started feeling so horrible that even though I wanted to go to that set more than I wanted life itself, I knew that I couldn't do it. And the person that I spoke to, my boss, said, if you don't come in today, then you're fired. And that was it. And, now I understand. At the time, I would have made a different decision now. Anyway, I went to the set and tried to work that day. And sure enough, I collapsed on the beach while we were filming. They had to get an ambulance to come and take me to the hospital. And at the hospital, they told me that I was dehydrated and that I just needed to drink a lot of water. So I did for the next week, and things didn't get better. What I was experiencing symptom-wise was almost pain. It did kind of feel like flu-like pain in my muscles, and just fatigue that felt like nothing else I'd ever felt in my whole life. I was having trouble thinking, a lot of these symptoms that you guys are possibly experiencing now. So that lasted, it wasn't dehydration. I mean, the emergency room, they can't really do anything else for you. Plus the fact that for the next probably about three or 4 years, maybe closer to 3, I went to doctor after doctor after doctor. I had to go to the hospital every once in a while because of various things that would happen. And you can read more about my COVID symptoms and aftermath, those symptoms, on my blog, which is at livingfrominspiration.com. But I'll put that below this. So anyway, nobody could really offer me anything. I ended up I had to move back to Columbia, South Carolina, to stay with my father because my boyfriend at the time, bless his heart, I mean, seriously, like, he stuck by me through a lot. But there was an environmental doctor in Charleston, and so we would drive down, I think, once a week for a while, because he was the one who knew the most about kind of what to do. But I did, I tried all sorts of things, and I did actually move to LA, I think about maybe a year after that incident. But I was so sick, you guys. It was so difficult, and eventually I did crash. I just straight up, I couldn't do it anymore, so I had to give up the place that I was in, and I'd been offered a pretty big role on a show, and I couldn't do it. I had to get in touch with my people. It was through a friend, actually the friend that I was renting from. So anyway, I had to actually, my boyfriend at the time had moved down to San Diego, so I was determined, though. I wanted to follow this dream of mine, of acting. So I moved down to, my boyfriend was in San Diego doing a job there, so I moved down there with him, but it was just so difficult because I couldn't, at that point, at that stage, there were times where I would have trouble even getting to the bathroom. Like, I would have to crawl on the floor to get to the bathroom. And we were 23, I think, at that point. So to ask a 23-year-old who was just starting his career in a new town across the country to take care of me was a lot. And that was a lot that he did. And it was very difficult for me, of course, because I didn't know what was happening in my body. So I moved back to Colombia, and I think we were still going to, I think that's actually when we started going to the doctors more, trying to find specialists and things like that. So I read a bunch of books, I was taking a bunch of supplements, I was trying so many different things. I tried dried worms at one point because that was supposed to help your immune system, and so it was a crazy ride. And what I finally got to was that at this point, now I did make some dietary changes that I could tell helped. So I'll share some of those with you guys too. And I also started to realize that it was like a pendulum. So it was like I'd feel better, still not right, but better for, let's say, a week. And then it would swing the other way, and I would be bedbound and have to have my father feed me for, whatever, because I couldn't lift my arm. And there were points where it felt like my cells were kind of turning inside out, is the best way I know how to describe it. So, and a lot of pain. So it actually was more like chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. There was a lot of muscle and skin even pain in there, kind of like when you have the flu. Bunch of other symptoms too, brain fog. Again, probably a lot of things that you guys are dealing with. So, but what I started to realize was that I had to deal with this, as much as the doctors wanted to help, there was not really anything they could do. And I mean, I had like, you know, marks in my arms everywhere because of getting blood drawn and, you know, infusions and whatever. And so, yeah, so I started doing a bunch of research, and I found something called energy healing or energy medicine. And I did do that, and that helped out with the emotional stuff. Not completely, but to the place where I could tell a little bit of a difference. And that, you know, even the smallest bit of relief when you're in that place really means a lot. And I'll be sharing some of that with you guys as well, what I practice, because I did become a practitioner because it did help. So what I started out with was something called emotional freedom technique, and then I moved to kind of a more, I'll say, more sophisticated form of energy medicine that is now called Trilogy. But it's Trilogy and Healing Codes. So you can find that on my website. So yeah, and then though I tried that super hard, you know, for like hours a day. And that wasn't good, because then I started having healing responses, and we'll go into that at some point as well. But what I finally got to in maybe year 7, I think, was that, and this is after compiling a notebook that's probably about this big of charts and graphs. I charted and I graphed how I felt every day, my different symptoms, all like 20 of them or whatever, to see if I could find some kind of pattern, to see if I could figure out what it was that was going on. But I couldn't. And so in that 7th year, I realized that I had to let it go. I had to let go of trying to figure it out. I had to let go of trying to address every single little thing that my body was doing at every given point. And I went, all right, you know, I'm letting go. And I also had this kind of flip, this switch that kind of flipped and went, okay, I need to change my focus here. And this was a kind of a gradual thing as well. But the switch happened, seems, you know, like all at once, but there were a lot of things that led up to it. But the switch was, when I do feel my body doing all this crazy stuff, instead of freaking out about it and saying, oh my God, something is really wrong, really wrong here, I changed the narrative. I changed the story to, that's my body taking care of itself. That's my body taking care of itself. That's my body taking care of itself. And probably a couple of months after that, I was able to, and it may have been a year, again, the timeline is super fuzzy, but I do remember being able to start taking restorative or just very easy yoga classes actually in a studio. And it kind of progressed from there to the place where, you know, about 10 years out, I think actually that's when I did, it may have been longer than 10 years, but I was able to start singing gigs at restaurants and bars and stuff like that. So the other thing that was really big about what I did was I got to be friends with my body. And that's so important, you guys, and we'll go through that as well. The body scan and emotional scan meditation, that's going to help you with that as well. But because we're so often just against our bodies, whether it has to do with weight or fitness or the way that we look in some way or whatever. But I actually literally started talking to my body, and I think that was about 3 or 4 years into it. But that's really important, and we'll talk more about that as well. So that's that portion of the story, and that's the big why, as far as why I have all of this experience in this pendulum that you might be experiencing right now. And it's so frustrating, I know. Believe me, I know. But again, I'm now to the place where it doesn't bother me. I mean, is it great? No, not really. But I do feel like it's a big opportunity. It's a huge opportunity, you guys, to be able to get to know myself and my body even deeper, and to be able to take these things that I know, the mindset and the meditation and the physical approach and all those different things, to be able to take them to an even deeper level. Now, one thing that I haven't really shared at all anywhere else is that I actually still experience a kind of similar thing on a regular basis and have my whole life, and that has to do with weather. And what happens is that anytime a front comes through, or thunderstorms, or what's called a trough is over me or whatever, and I think it has to do with air pressure, but this is another thing that doctors don't know what to do with, the medical community doesn't know what to do with. There's not any research really out there on it, but I experience similar symptoms. So the chronic fatigue kind of stuff, brain fog, tingling sometimes, muscle, hurting, skin hurting sometimes, with weather. And of course, I live in the Southeast right now, and man, we have, all sorts of stuff coming through. So I still live with that uncertainty. It's not quite the same thing as what you guys are experiencing, or what I experienced with the chronic fatigue syndrome. There are some things that are the same, but I also know that when I have good days, so when the weather is not doing stuff, whatever it's doing, I am like on. Like I can do, 4 hours of yoga back to back to back, and some of that, or all of it, is like super advanced and super dynamic and powerful. So so that's a little bit different from where you guys are, if you are experiencing this pendulum kind of thing, because you have to be very careful about your good days still aren't quite as good, right? But my point there is that I have lived with and still live with that uncertainty of, I can look at the map, actually the weather map, and either feel a certain way and then look at the map and go, okay, that's what I figured, there's a front approaching. Or I can look at the map and say, okay, so these days this front's coming through, or there are going to be thunderstorms or whatever, so I need to make sure that I don't plan a whole lot for that particular day, or for those days, or for the day in front of it, or these days are, look like they're going to be pretty open, so I'm going to, plan a lot of activity. And again, man, when I'm on, I'm like on. And I think that that's shifting actually through the breathing exercise that I'm going to be showing you. So that's my background. And I've also been coaching people doing the energy work with them as well for 20 years now, some of them with similar kinds of things, you know, chronic conditions or even chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. And I really would say that what it sounds like most of you guys are experiencing who are having these lingering symptoms is very much like chronic fatigue syndrome. I was talking to a doctor who specializes in fatigue and in chronic fatigue syndrome, whose book I read, you know, 15 years ago, whatever. But I was we've been emailing back and forth, and he said that it does seem like there are lots of people who, after they have the full-blown COVID, are now developing chronic fatigue syndrome. So, you know, don't give the power to that name. Don't let it freak you out. It's just a name. And like I said, we're going to be going through things that will help you out. So I especially recommend that you sign up for that 5-day plan on my website. You can find it on the website. If you have any trouble, let me know. And when you do that, you'll also sign up for the newsletter. If you don't want the plan, if you just want to sign up for the newsletter, you can do that. I will be coming out with a subscription program August 1st that goes into more depth with all of this, right? So that'll be available to you as well. And I think I'm going to start that out at a fairly low cost to begin with, and then it'll probably go up. But yeah, so we're going to be doing some very, very light yoga. So I'll offer a couple of different classes for you guys, probably 15. Each of these things is probably going to be about 15 minutes. Meditations for you, mindset shifts for you, a couple of the energy work, energy medicine. We'll do a couple of those sessions, and the breathing. So in addition to some interviews as well, we'll do that. So if you have any suggestions, anything that you would like to see, then let me know. I'm also available for coaching one-on-one and for one-on-one energy healing sessions. And you can go to my website for that as well. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions or what you think about all this down in the comments below. And I'll see you in other videos.